This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, Jon Buhler, lead writer for FanSided. As you can see, I am flying solo like a cup today with Cody Williams, content director, FanSided.com, making his way to the Bay Area to go cover the Super Bowl. I'll be doing this show, the next one, and maybe the one on Super Bowl Sunday in and around that time, depending on if and when he can get back to Albuquerque from, the other side of the pond here. But I got an exciting show for you guys today. It's super cold out here in Atlanta. It's the wind chill has it at 2, very 2 degrees. That's about how many halves that were played in the first half, or the game with Georgia. They lost by Texas A&M. They've lost 3 in a row. This is going really great on the hardwood. But before we begin, be sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, give this thing a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Really helps the show grow here. We're 2 subscribers away from 55. Can't really do it right now because I just ate some food and that's how it goes. But let's not dilly-dally anymore. Let's get started with our first and 15 today with Big Ten energy. Yes, former TCU head coach Gary Patterson is going to be the defensive coordinator for the USC Trojans this year. This comes in the wake of D'Anton Lynn leaving Los Angeles to go to another Big Ten school. He's going to link up with Matt Campbell and be the defensive coordinator at Penn State, replacing Jim Knowles, who's now at Tennessee, replacing Tim Banks, who's doing something else right now, I suppose. I didn't realize this, but Gary Patterson had not been a head coach in the Power Four or at TCU since 2021. Like, I feel like he was just there yesterday, but then again, 22 was Sonny Dykes' first year there in Fort Worth, and the Horned Frogs played my Georgia Bulldogs for a national championship. So it's really been an Olympiad, if you will, since Gary Patterson last led a Power Four team. He has worked, across college football in some capacities. I think he was like a analyst there for Steve Sarkisian there at Texas, but he goes to USC and I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm kind of bullish on what USC can be this year. Look, we'll touch on the playoff here a little bit more because, FanDuel's put out some odds and we'll discuss what that does for, the Big Ten and the rest of college football. But I think USC, what they did this past year shows me that they could conceivably make the playoff for the first time in school history this upcoming season. You've got Jaden Maiava back at quarterback. Even though he is a transfer, he came from UNLV, he is bringing a little bit of that blue collar ethos that I think has gotten away from what makes USC great. Lincoln Riley has not helped in that capacity, but I do appreciate him having the wherewithal to bring a guy that he had a lot of respect for in the Big 12, when he was at Oklahoma and Patterson was at TCU, bringing him into the fold in Los Angeles. And again, look, what's Gary Patterson know about Big Ten football? I don't particularly care. I know that he knows a lot about defense, and he's going to bring in his type of guys that are going to probably give USC the more well-rounded sort of team that they need to be to, win 10 games in the Big Ten and make the playoff. Look, unless Maiava has a Heisman Trophy caliber season, I don't necessarily think USC is going to win a national title, but they could go 10-2. They could go 11-1. I mean, I thought Indiana was going to go 9-3. They went 16-0. Shows what I honestly know here. But this to me tells me that Lincoln Riley is finally starting to figure it out a little bit. Look, when Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma in the Big 12, the league was still largely defined by, the air raid offense and largely pillow fight defenses. The Texas Tech of old kind of defined that. It's interesting now that Texas Tech is all defense and no offense, but that's one side of the pendulum swung to the other. But when I look at, I guess with Gary Patterson taking over at USC on the defensive side of the ball, you're effectively kind of getting what made Oklahoma so special under Bob Stoops, and then under Lincoln Riley for those 5 years in Los Angeles. And I think that can translate to the Big 12. I think that, not Big 12, the Big 10. You have a little bit more firepower. You have a well-balanced coaching staff. And that might be enough to beat up on some of the middle class there, the soft tummy of the Big Ten that I continue to say is not good, even though they beat a lot of SEC teams and the bowl teams that nobody cared about. But I'll say this, like this is a hire that I think makes me view USC more favorably. I'll tell you this much. I think it does more for USC stock than Arthur Smith replacing Brian Hartline at Ohio State. And I thought very highly of that hire. I think that that's a guy that's going to bring in some level of pro style offense. I think Brian Hartline is more of a recruiter and receivers coach than anything. Not really bullish on what South Florida is going to be under him, but what do I honestly know? I guess to really tie a bow on this kind of this abbreviated episode, if you will. Again, we're still gonna do all 6 segments here because this is what we got to do here. Trying to record this before I lose power because that's just how it is in Atlanta right now. End of January, early February. Can't wait for March and April when I get to go to Germany. Cody's gonna be excited about that. Doing a lot of shows there, so maybe he'll scratch my back then while I scratch his now. Look, this hire by Gary Patterson, a guy who's a Hall of Fame level head coach, a guy who had been an institution at TCU for 2 decades, that matters. That carries gravitas. I don't necessarily know if that's going to really impact USC as positively on the recruiting trail as you would think, but this is a guy that really knows defense. And I think more importantly, he's going to build off of what Lynn did in Los Angeles and really help elevate the floor of USC. What's hurt USC for the better part of the last decade or so is they just don't have it defensively most times. They usually have a quarterback who's not all about the right stuff, slinging it around the rock, and then you go like 8-4 into the 9-3, and we talk about how next year is going to be the year, and it's not. But this year it might be because there's more things that I like about USC. Look, I'm never going to be a big Lincoln Riley fan at all. I don't think he's about it, but I think he is showing enough that he is surrounding himself with enough good people to overcome some of his flaws and inefficiencies as a head coach. So this is a tremendous pickup there for the USC Trojans. There's no way around that. So let's get rolling with our second topic here with playoffs. You kidding me? FanDuel released its latest national championship odds, and I'm gonna take a look at this and just rattle a few of them off, and then kind of see where my head's at. Again, I'm gonna touch on the ones who are plus 50, plus 5,000 or better. Leading the way, you have Notre Dame at plus 650, followed by Ohio State, Texas, Indiana at plus 700, Oregon at 950, Georgia at 1100, Miami at 1300, Texas Tech 1400, LSU and Texas A&M at 1600. Big drop off down to the next level, which is Alabama at plus 2700, Ole Miss 3500, same with Oklahoma and USC. Michigan is plus 4,000, and Florida is at plus 5,000. If we go even further down here to probably 10,000, you got teams like Auburn, Penn State, Tennessee, Missouri, BYU, SMU, Utah, and then it kind of really falls off. So looking at the top of this, and again, I wrote about this, for FanSided and around the network. I wrote about this for Dawn of the Dog. Georgia at 1,100 is kind of disgraceful. Look, this last year's team was incredibly young, very green. I think they overachieved expectations. But you look at the teams ahead of them: Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, Indiana, and Oregon. Outside of Ohio State, I think I've kind of got a bone to pick with all of them. I wrote about that as such on Dawn of the Dog. You can definitely check that out at your leisure. Notre Dame having the best odds at plus 650. Yes, I understand they're not going to play really anybody in their 12-game cupcake schedule that they get to cherry pick and siphon off of the ACC as a parasite. I think there's just really bad karma with how they handled not making the playoff, and I think in a way that could come back to haunt them. And that's not to say that Notre Dame is not going to try very hard next year. They will. They most certainly will. But I don't like how that looked at all. Also, they haven't won a national championship since the internet's been a thing. So I'll believe it when I see it. They've been to 2 national championships in 24 and then I think in 12 and didn't win either of them. I'm good with Ohio State. That being said, I do think Notre Dame could have better odds than Georgia. I don't like them having the best odds in the country. Ohio State plus 700, I'd probably give them the best odds because like the most talented team in the Big Ten, that league seems to have the upper crust of the Big Ten seems to have separated from the rest of the league in the new NIL pay-for-play era. I don't really think the rest of the conference is that good, but the upper echelon of the Big Ten is fantastic. I can't really deny that. Indiana at plus 700. Look, here's what I'm thinking with them. Nobody's repeating in the 12 team playoff. That's just not happening anymore. The last team to repeat is going to be Georgia. They won it in the 4 team format. You got to be expecting guys like Josh Hoover to come in here and be the galvanizing presence of Fernando Mendoza. He might be, but that's putting that guy in an awful spot. And he was really good at TCU. I don't know if he's that good. I never really thought like the last 3 years, like, man, are you seeing what Josh Hoover's doing at Fort Worth? I did that a little bit with Fernando Mendoza at Cal, but didn't expect them to do that as well. And then you kind of wonder if the disease of me is going to impact Indiana. Look, I will say this: Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, and Georgia are the only 4 programs to have made the 12 team playoff in both years. And I would be foolish to say that, to cross any of them off. I would venture to guess, like, if we're going to be formulating a playoff field right now, it would serve you to have all 4 of those teams in. And again, like, they get the benefit of the doubt. They seem to have the right formula to at least finish in the top 10 in their respective sport. So I'm okay with that. And then as far as Texas and Oregon, all right, we're buying into the Texas hype train once again. Look, this is Arch Manning. I think he's got the best Heisman odds. We'll touch on that here in a little bit, but Steve Sarkisian still got something to prove as a head coach. He might be the 4th best head coach in college football behind Kirby Smart, Kurt Cignetti, and Ryan Day. He's right up there with, Marcus Freeman, Mario Cristobal, Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, whomever you want to put in that next tier of team of coaches. But they're 0-3 versus Georgia since joining the SEC. Georgia's won the last 2 SEC championships. And maybe Texas can, run the gauntlet and, win, as a 5 through 12 seed. I mean, they got to the semis 2 years ago in that regard, but I haven't quite seen them punch it in. It's been 2 decades since they won a national championship. And I think they're going to do it under Sark. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be with Arch, but they might be. For that to happen, I think Will Muschamp's going to have to be like the Broyles Award winner on the defensive side of the ball for them, and that's hurting Georgia as well. So I'm not ruling out Texas winning a national championship, but like, you haven't beaten Georgia yet. Like, I can't get past that. And then Oregon's never won a national title. I do think it's a big deal that Dante Moore is coming back, but you are losing your 2 coordinators of note. Will Stein's taking over at Kentucky, and Tosh Lupoi is taking over at his alma mater of Cal. That's significant. And I know Oregon's recruiting phenomenally under Dan Lanning, but I don't trust the Ducks in a big spot. Anytime they get to a spot where, like, I feel like they really need to take care of business, they just don't do it. They threw up all over themselves versus Indiana this past year. They did it versus Ohio State a year ago. Honestly, Dan Lanning's got a rematch problem. He just doesn't do very well the second time around. It's the anti-Kirby Smart, who I think is 4-1 in rematch games, where I think Lanning's like, what, 0-3, because he's lost to Indiana last year, Ohio State, and then I think Washington a couple of times. So yeah, I'm a little concerned with that. Moving beyond the Georgia of it all, if I got to take a team, and again, we'll touch on Michigan here in a little bit. We'll look at teams, with 3,500 or better odds that I like their chances of winning it all. That maybe is kind of a dark horse here. I don't necessarily know if I want to go with LSU. I think that, the Lane Kiffin karma of it all, the Sam Levitt part of it too. Like, that team could be talented and could prove me wrong. But like, I think that they're talented enough to potentially do it, but I'm not sure. The team that I'm really looking at, I think Texas Tech's interesting for me. And I'll kind of go with this real quick. I'll touch on Texas Tech and I'll touch on Miami before we move on to, our next topic here. I think Texas Tech's legit. I think that the defense could be year over year. It's part of the culture that Joe McGuire is building there in Lubbock. Cody Campbell's going to keep drilling, man, keep funneling money into his alma mater. And that's going to be, gangbusters there for the Red Raiders. I think the other thing is, beyond the Red Raiders, like, who do you really like a lot in the Big 12? I think BYU is really good, but do you think BYU is going to be better than Texas Tech? We saw them play twice. It wasn't a game. It was no contest. And again, like, we're putting Texas Tech ahead of BYU for similar reasons. I mean, Texas Tech's plus 1,400 and BYU's plus 8,000. But we continue to put Texas ahead of Georgia. It doesn't make any sense. We do have Indiana ahead of Oregon, so that's fair. Um, but I think the pathway in, I think Texas Tech is kind of becoming what Clemson was during the peak era under Dabo Swinney, where you're looking at a team that is, defined by defense. You got an SEC team playing in a non-SEC league, and you'll take advantage. I have a hard time seeing Texas Tech being any worse than 10-2, particularly with them getting former Cincinnati and Indiana quarterback Brendan Sorsby into Lubbock. That's a massive upgrade over Baron Morton Salt. So I think that that works very well for Texas Tech. They're kind of my dark horse there. Again, I kind of have them in the playoff field as an early lock. Again, I'll touch on that probably more so later on, but there's a lot of teams there that I feel very confident will make it back. But then again, we only had four make it back this past year. And as a matter of fact, I think I only got four or five teams right to make the playoff field last year. That was Ohio State, that was Oregon, that was Georgia, and that was Ole Miss for me. Those are the only ones I got right. But a lot of people got a lot of stuff wrong. Again, I think I had what I had Miami and Indiana were close. Notre Dame almost made it. Texas almost made it. So it was a tough year for people trying to project the playoff as feel as well. And then I'll go with Miami. I'll go with Miami here real quick. Um, I think it's hilarious that they were able to steal both Darian Mensah and Cooper Barcade, if that's how you say his last name correctly, away from Duke. Look, that's adding an interesting wrinkle to the rivalry between Duke and Miami, the Manny Diaz Bowl, if you will. Duke won the ACC. Miami didn't get to play for it. Miami, won the first round game at Texas Tech. Then they won the Sugar Bowl. No, they won the Cotton Bowl over Ohio State, and then they beat Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl, and then played at home in a national championship and kept it close with Indiana. They're recruiting at a phenomenal level. I think the other big thing for Miami is they're able to retain both of their star coordinators. Shannon Dawson was up for the Tulane gig. I think honestly Tulane should have hired him as opposed to Will Hall. That might be a disaster for the Green Wave. And then Corey Heatherman, this is year two for him there in Miami. Candidate for the Broyles, he may end up winning it. I think they're probably going to give it to Brian Haynes out of Indiana. I think that's probably the most logical guy to give it to. But for lack of a better word, Miami just kind of feels strong and powerful in the ACC. The Virginia schools could be good. Georgia Tech could be good. Florida State could be on the come up. But right now, Miami just seems very powerful. And I think Duke is still a contending team in that league. Same with, SMU. But at the same time, like Miami just seems really strong and powerful here. So that's kind of what I got right there with, the betting odds from FanDuel on national championships. So I'll move on to the next topic with some do Haas or do Hast. Will Michigan make the playoff under Kyle Whittingham in his first season on the job? This is very close, and I can discuss this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to go do Haas two S's. And this is interesting because I wrote about this for GBM Wolverine. I looked at their schedule, and I also looked at their odds. Again, Michigan is at plus 4,000. That would put them based on FanDuel's odds. If you take the top 11 teams and then the best group of five team. So if you were to do this based on this, it'd be Notre Dame 1, Ohio State 2, Texas 3, Indiana 4, Oregon 5, Georgia 6, Miami 7, Texas Tech 8, LSU 9, Texas A&M 10, Alabama's your last team in, then your group of five team, which apparently doesn't have to be a conference champion, just the highest ranked group of five team. Your first four out would be Ole Miss, Oklahoma, USC, and Michigan. And I was looking at their schedule, and again, they hired Kyle Whittingham. Look, kind of to they probably didn't they weren't sure of this. Obviously, the Schroeder scandal did a number on basically the Michigan program. I remember I was dog sitting Bosco, taking him on a walk, and I saw this news breaking on Wednesday. It was wild, but Whittingham is probably one of the best coaches to not lead a team to the playoff yet. Utah is probably one of the best programs that hasn't made the playoff in the first, decade or so that we've been doing this. Again, I can't really remember. Maybe it's 12 years we've been having the playoff. Utah, I figured would have made it in the 12-team format previously, but obviously the Pac-12 wasn't quite there. They've been close, and this is a team that it wouldn't shock me if they were to challenge Texas Tech or BYU, in the Big 12 this year. But it remains to be seen what Morgan Scalley is going to do. I think the big challenge with Michigan is they got a brutal schedule. So they got to play the second part of their home and home. I think, okay, this is their non-conference stuff. Let me take a sip of water, clear my throat real quick before I get going with this. This is good. So Michigan's three non-conference games, they're all at home. They host Western Michigan, they host UTEP, and then they've got Oklahoma in between. They had to play, remember, they played Oklahoma on the road and they lost. And that was a game that really helped jumpstart, the John Mateer hype train and Oklahoma and potentially make them playoff, which they did. If Michigan wins that game, they're making the playoff. They were very close. I forget exactly who they've got easy wins against, but they play the three teams in the Big Ten who made the playoff a year ago. They host Indiana, and then I think they got to have, I think in November, that game's in October. And then I think November, I think they've got I forget who the first one is, but then they've got to get sandwich here. They play at Eugene, then they host I think they host UCLA, and then they go to Ohio State. I think the first game of that might have been Michigan State, maybe, but Michigan State's not good right now. We'll see if they get better under Pat Fitzgerald. But you basically have to win that game over Oklahoma at home, and then just somehow you got to be able to, knock Indiana off at home, or maybe, win in the horseshoe. And again, that's the end of the year. That's a rivalry game. Maybe you can do that. I don't see Michigan winning at Oregon. I think that that's probably the most likely loss on their schedule. Look, the best case scenario is probably 11-1 with a loss at Oregon. And maybe you have an opportunity at redemption in Indianapolis in the Big Ten Championship. Worst case scenario is you lose all four of those games, whether that's, Oklahoma, Indiana at home, on the road, at Oregon, at Ohio State, and then maybe you drop another one along the way. Maybe that's on the road to Michigan. Maybe it's home versus Iowa, UCLA, Penn State. I think that's you have wins to be had there. And I do think Bryce Underwood's gonna progress. I think anytime Utah has had a quality quarterback, Whittingham has been able to get something out of him. Even though he's a defensive-minded guy, I think that's just something to keep an eye on. It's going to be very close. I think right now I projected Michigan to go 9-3. They beat Oklahoma, but they lose to Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. So really, what it comes down to is like, do you think four Big Ten teams are going to make the playoff? Right now, it doesn't look like it. It could potentially happen, but also you have to remember that they don't play USC during the regular season. So I wrote about this in my article for GBM Wolverine. And this is just my way too early. Again, we're talking like the very end of January. I've got all offseason to kind of figure this out. So trying to figure out like locks to make the playoff. I think I eventually caught to about 9. So right now I would say, okay, Georgia, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. They made it the previous 2 years. I'd be shocked if any of them missed out this past year. So that's 4. Notre Dame and Texas did not make it this past year. They barely missed out. They made it the year before. They won playoff games. I'd be stunned if both of them did not make it this upcoming year, particularly with Texas's upside and Notre Dame's soft schedules. That's 6. Then you move down to like Miami and Texas Tech. You got to ask yourself this. If not them, who? I mean, if you look at the Texas Tech, the next team to probably knock them off, odds wise, is BYU. And then for Miami, the next one would be SMU. And we're talking about teams that have, plus 8,000 and plus 10,000 to win a national championship. So that gets you to 8. And then you got your group of 5 champion. That's very interesting as well. I also came across this article on ESPN.com. Bill Connolly did a great thing. He initially looked at Mark Schlabach's projected top 10 and saw, or top 25, and see who'd make the playoffs there. And he kind of followed a formula, in some sort of ways to kind of get the field. I think he had Notre Dame beating Georgia in the national championship. Not the most wackadoo thing he's ever done, but like there's things there. One of the things he mentioned is there's always a team that comes out of nowhere to make the playoff each year where you're like, I did not see that coming at all. That might have been Arizona State 2 years ago. I think, if you're looking at who that might have been, I think that's probably getting 2 G5 teams in, with Tulane and James Madison. So like you're kind of reserving like one spot for the ultimate wild card. He picked Oklahoma State. Is that team? Because you're effectively taking all of what made North Texas great and bringing that to Stillwater under Eric Morris. And I mean, that could be a possibility, but I'm not willing to put my willing to pick a team at this point. That'd probably be a really good 4-for-4 with Cody at some point. And then you also got to look at this. So like I'm looking at like the next tier of teams, between LSU. I think it's between LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama. of those teams in the and then of those teams in the SEC, I would be stunned. Like of those three, you'd venture to guess one of them is going to make the playoff, probably, right? And maybe not Alabama. It could be LSU. It might be Texas A&M, but like just assume one of that cluster. And then your next cluster of teams, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, USC, Michigan, maybe one comes out of there. So again, we're talking about like Michigan's really competing for three spots, maybe only two. So you're kind of looking at the teams there with the odds between LSU and Michigan. I mean, teams that are plus 1600 to plus 4000 that we're up for debate. We're thinking like, okay, maybe this is the new wrinkle in this year's playoff. So and again, maybe it'll be closer to six teams who made it this past year making it back. Again, I don't really know. But again, it's very close with how Michigan is. And I think they're a team that's gonna be fascinating to watch. I mean, you could root for them if you want, but like I think the chances of the Big Ten getting four teams in probably a little more likely than the SEC getting five in. So I've kind of always operated under the principle, in a 12-team playoff, you've got between seven and eight teams who are going to make it between the SEC and the Big Ten. You had eight last year, you had seven the year prior. So like right now, I'd say if the SEC is going to get if the SEC is going to get two teams in, it's going to be Georgia and Texas. If it's going to get three in, um, God, I don't even know who I'd probably say at this point. Maybe LSU, get some new blood in there. And then you really want to count Alabama out. Again, I haven't looked so much at the SEC schedule. The Big Ten is their fourth team. It's going to come down to Michigan or USC, but they don't play each other. So we don't really know. Again, Duhas, two S's. I don't think Michigan gets in right now, but a lot can change between now and when we get to this, at the start of the year, in August. Again, it's the end of January. We haven't even gotten to September yet. So that's kind of what I got right there with Duhas or Duhas. Let's move on to our fourth topic today with live from Eric Crouch's couch. FanDuel showed up big time on Friday. Shout out to Dakota Gregory bringing this to our mind. Looking at some of the Heisman odds, and I'm going to touch on people who are, I don't know, we're going to read them down. Arch Manning and CJ Carr, Texas and Notre Dame's quarterback, are tied at 750 for the best odds. Incoming transfer to Indiana at quarterback Josh Hoover from TCU is at plus 1,000. The Ohio State tandem of Jeremiah Smith and Julian Sayin at wide receiver and quarterback are plus 1,300. Darian Mensah at Miami from Duke at quarterback is 1,500. Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton's at 1,500. Former Arizona State, Michigan State quarterback Sam Levitt at LSU is at 1,500. Dante Moore, former UCLA, back for a second year at Oregon, is at plus 1,500. Brendan Sorsby, Texas Tech transfer from Cincinnati by way of Indiana, he's at 2,500. Jade Mayala with USC, he's at 2,500. John Mateers, 2,500. Malachi Tony, 2,700. Lenore Sellers, plus 3,000. Bryce Underwood, plus 3,000. Austin Mack, plus 3,000. Byron Brown, former USF quarterback, now at Auburn's 3,500. And then I think it really drops off there with Damon Williams Jr., Aaron Philo, plus 5,500. So I'm just going to look at this real quick. There's a few things on here that don't make sense to me. And again, I'm okay with like the Arch Manning hype. This is what it is. People are going to bet on him. Same thing with CJ Carr at Notre Dame. I think you could get better odds in this, maybe. But maybe they'll go up there, but like I would kind of stay away from them, have them suffer a loss, then I bet on them. Again, I'm not really a gambling guy, but that's kind of what I would do. I got a couple of guys here on that I think that they're putting way too much on their plate besides Manning a Carr. I think Josh Hoover at plus 1,000 is ridiculous. I also think I also think that Julian Sayin getting plus 1,300 is not very strong. And I think Gunnar Stockton plus 1,500 should be higher. I do see Darian Mensah at plus 1,500 being pretty good. Because let me put it this way, this reaffirms that he made the right decision to transfer from Duke to Miami because he wouldn't have those odds. And again, there's a lot of pressure on him. I think there's a chance between him, Mensah, between Mensah, Levitt, and Sorsby. One of them it's a regrettable transfer. I don't necessarily know who I think that's going to be. That remains to be seen. But I do think Mensah at plus 1,500 is very tasty. That one really excites me a lot as well. We'll see how quickly he adapts to Shannon Dawson's offense. Because, I mean, he played at Tulane for a year. He played at Duke for a year. Now he's at Miami. And he's probably turned pro at some point, too. I'm going to talk about Josh Hoover, then I'm going to talk about San, and then I'm going to talk about Stockton. And then we'll kind of get on with the last third of our show. We're putting Hoover in an impossible situation. Again, this is a guy that was good, but not great at TCU. He's the guy that replaced Max Duggan there, on the Horned Frogs. Had a lot of success at TCU, won a lot of games, but like TCU's not really been at the front of the conversation the last 3 years. Haven't been close to a playoff team at any point either. So everybody else that's kind of on here, has just been more high profile. Obviously, Arch Manning plays at Texas. CJ Carr's Lloyd Carr's grandson plays at Notre Dame and not Michigan. Jeremiah Smith, the best receiver in college football. Julian Sand was a Heisman finalist last year. Darian Mensah, Sam Levitt, Brennan Sorsby were all higher profile transfers than Josh Hoover. And then obviously Gunnar Stockton and Dante Moore quarterbacked playoff teams a year ago. It's like you're expecting Josh Hoover to be Fernando Mendoza 2.0. Maybe he is, but I don't think there's anybody that's that goddamn enthusiastic as much as Fernando Mendoza. Hoover's himself. Maybe he's closer to Curtis Rourke than he is Fernando Mendoza. He's going to fall somewhere in between on that spectrum under Kurt Cignetti. But I kind of wonder if the karmic implications of that, of punting on Mendoza's brother Alberto, who's now at Georgia Tech, in favor of Hoover, while your team's still in the playoff, like I wonder if that's going to work out for you. Um, Look, I don't necessarily know when Indiana's going to lose again. I don't think they're going 16-0. I don't necessarily think that you can recreate what you did a year ago. And again, I'm not saying they won't make the playoff. They probably will. They'll probably win 10 plus games this year. But that's such an impossible ask to do it again. Because I mean, you can hit on the portal as much as you can, but until you recruit out of high school at a different level, where's your safety net? So again, I think that's throwing the money away. Again, let Josh Hoover lose a game, get them in the playoff, and then take his odds. Like, what's the difference between Josh Hoover and Rocco Beck? To be straight with you, like, where's Rocco Beck's odds down here? Rocco Beck is at plus 6,500. He's on Penn State. I think I'm good with that. Lincoln Kienholz has the same odds as Rocco Beck did with Louisville now. Devin Dampier. Oh man, that's another one. So Christopher Vizina, the guy who's going to replace Cade Klubnik at Clemson, Connor Wegman at 8,000. Quan Lacey. Honestly, Quan Lacey, the running back, at Ole Miss, maybe he's more likely to win it than Josh Hoover at this point. And again, like I think the Sand, Stockton, and Moore part of it too. And I'm gonna throw Moore in here too. I think with Sand, maybe you're like, okay, you're splitting odds, you're splitting hairs, you're pulling from the same constituency, the same team as Jeremiah Smith. Maybe they both get to New York, but look, Sand was a finalist last year. Look, I wouldn't have voted for him if I had a ballot. I mean, the way that I would have voted for my ballot, I would have had I think what would I have said on the show? I think I said I think I had Mendoza 1, Pavia 2, and then Stockton 3, and I would have had Love 4 probably is how I would have done it. But with saying it's like, I guess he's got to learn a new system. He's incredibly talented. I would say beyond Arch Manning, I think he's probably the most blue chip of these guys coming out of high school. Carr is well thought of too, maybe more in some capacity, but certainly more than Hoover and Stockton and Levitt and Sorsby and Mayava and Marcel Reed, Mateer, all these guys who could be vying for it as well. I feel like that's kind of disrespectful. I feel like why can't he be at plus 1,000? It doesn't make sense to me, right? Obviously, Stockton, I've kind of biased with Georgia. He's back in Mike Bobo's offense. Again, I got to know who his receiving core is going to be. The guys like Cam Newton, 2.0, from a playing standpoint, I think he's going to have a phenomenal year at Georgia. It wouldn't shock me if he won the damn Heisman next year or Georgia won the national championship. I think that's kind of what's at stake this year for UGA. And then Dante Moore, I mean, that's the same thing with Oregon. This is a guy, granted, he's got a slightly different system with Will Stein off to Kentucky, but like he chose to come back as opposed to turning pro and probably, would have been wide receiver or QB2 behind Mendoza. I guess he really didn't want to play for the Jets. He wants to play for another team that wears green that's not going to a national championship. But that's the way it goes here. And I guess like if I had to go like beyond the plus 2,500, anybody who I think's like a real dark horse to win the Heisman, um, anybody who's a dark horse that I think could win a Heisman Trophy here. I'll tell you what, Rocco Beck at 6,500 kind of intrigues me. He's played a lot of ball at Iowa State. Again, Iowa State's basically at Penn State now. Penn State makes the playoff. You're 10-2 and you win those games that Drew Aller couldn't do. Maybe you do it. I wouldn't rule that out there. So that's kind of what I got here with that. Let's move on to our penultimate topic here with it don't mean enough. I don't know if I'm gonna get this absolutely right, but Jon Sumrall is kind of channeling his inner Urban Meyer, at Florida. One of the things that made Urban Meyer, I don't even know if great's really the right word, but he did this at Florida. He did this at Ohio State. I don't know what he did at Bowling Green or Utah, but he did this. Like he basically made the players have to earn, the stripe on the helmet at right down my part here at Ohio State, and then you had to earn wearing Florida Gators gear, like the emblem. Like in practice, you're just wearing white, blue, and orange, like very basic, whatever Jumpman stuff without the logo, without the logo on. Like you have to earn wearing this emblem. I don't know if it's going to work out. I can't say I'm ready for it. I mean, Jon Sumrall, for anybody who's like listened to the show, knows that Cody Williams and I like rave about him. He was our favorite group of five guy for the first 3 years we were doing the show. Tulane the last 2 years, and then the first year, which was the second year, first year we were doing this, the second year at Troy. Obviously, he goes to take over at my alma mater's arch rival in Florida. They're hiring him to turn it around there because Billy Napier could not do it. Summerall, I hope he's built for it, man. He's either going to be like Sark at Texas, or it's going to be, I mean, God, it's going to be like Billy Napier or Jim McElwain, where he's just not ready for this. And even if he's just Dan Mullen, I mean, we saw that program chew him up and spit him out. Like, unless you're Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier and win national championships, Florida's a tough job. So I understand what he's trying to do there. He's trying to take a page out of what made Urban Meyer so successful at Florida. And again, I'll bite my tongue on some of those reasons why that might have been. But I don't know, Urban Meyer was a galvanizer. Urban Meyer was able to, wherever he went, he won. He won quickly. He got people who could buy in to exactly what he's doing. And I think I don't even necessarily know if like Florida was really that down bad under Ron Zook, but like, you replace the guy, you replace the guy. And Utah, what was Utah before he was there? Seems like that's a great program now with what Kyle Whittingham's done in the 20 years since he left. And then Ohio State's never down. They had a bad year under Luke Fickell as an interim with who I'll touch on probably here in a little bit. In between the Jim Tressel scandal, which is dumb in retrospect because like the players got free tattoos. Like they're getting all sorts of free stuff now, paying people millions of dollars who can't even legally drink a beer or rent a car. It's unbelievable. Making more money for throwing a football one time than I will ever make my entire life. It's unbelievable. God, we live in the strangest timeline of all time. But anyway, I think when you're looking at Sumrall here, he's just trying to establish a level of pride that I think Florida's lost in recent years. Granted, when you're getting your ass kicked by Georgia every year, Miami's firing on all cylinders, and Florida State's even been a little bit better than you at times, although they're dysfunctional. You got to get wins where you can. I do think hiring Buster Faulkner away from Georgia Tech, bringing in Aaron Philo, that'll help. That'll help get Florida going. But let's put it this way. This will kind of be like Nick Saban having John Parker Wilson at quarterback. Like you don't really get that ball rolling until Greg McElroy's there, when AJ McCarron's your quarterback. Like once you get there, maybe we'll see something happen. But I mean, your biggest rivals are thriving. Georgia, Miami, you're kicking a lot of tail. You don't play Miami every year, but like they're in your backyard, they're in your similar recruiting territory. Tennessee's solid, or at least in a decent spot under Josh Heupel. LSU, they've got Lane Kiffin right now. Trying to think who else Florida really hates. Most of those teams. I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't necessarily know if Jon Sumrall is going to work out, but he has won everywhere he's been. I do think he took a job that, not to say that he's underqualified for, because what has Florida been for the last decade for the most part? I think it's interesting that he's taking a job where like there's room for him to grow. When he was at Troy, I thought, okay, maybe he's going to take this and then go to like a Power Four gig. But we saw what happened with Neil Brown. It didn't work out for him at West Virginia. He went to a job that had some momentum there, under under Willie Fritz, and Tulane was great. They made a terrible decision of replacing Summerall with Will Hall. Again, I could blow up my face as well, and we'll touch on that probably here in a little bit. But he's got an opportunity to really kind of really come into his own at Florida. I think it's interesting that like his alma mater of Kentucky opened up and they went with Will Stein. Maybe he didn't want that job, but and maybe there's less pressure. In a weird way, maybe there's less pressure with him on him at Florida than he would have been at Kentucky because at Kentucky he had to work. Whereas at Florida, even people who love him and rave about Jon Sumrall are still dubious. I will say that when Urban Meyer went to Florida, there wasn't really any doubt. And even for me, like this would have been like high school me, like teenage me. I'm like, oh, the guy from Utah is going to go, who want to eat Bowling Green is going to go to Florida. I'm like, yeah, that's going to work. And again, I kind of remember the tail end of Spurrier. He used to drive Georgia fans crazy. And I wasn't really a Georgia fan at that point because I didn't go to school at that point there either. But like, I remember the Ron Zook era. Had some friends that were Florida fans and just drove him nuts. So maybe this will work out for Summerall, but like we got to see what he does, how he puts his own spin on this. Because like, look, Steve Spurrier is singular. We all know that, and I think Urban Meyer is singular too. Look, these guys have proteges. I mean, the best protege under Steve Spurrier is Bob Stoops. The greatest protege under Urban Meyer, I mean, probably Kyle Whittingham right now. Dan Mullen's damn good one too as well. So like they have robust coaching trees, but like Summerall's got to be himself because Florida's a job where it will devour anybody alive. And on that note, C's get degrees, man. Let's get out of here with our last topic. I want to do this with Cody, but like I saw this on I think CBS Sports. I forget exactly. It was Chip Patterson put it out there. He's like grading the last coaching hires that were made 3 off seasons ago. So again, these coaches have hired or 4 off seasons ago, like coaches who have coached 3 years at their respective jobs. 23, 24, 25. Put five on it. Yes. So I'm kind of looking through some of these and just kind of thinking about like where my head was at. Because again, I think I wrote about this a lot, like these hires. I remember doing like a very thorough article for fansided.com way back in the day that would like link to it. You could like move around whenever they would make hires. I was so proud. One of my proudest articles ever. So we're gonna work our way through here. So the first guy that was hired, so when Jeff Collins was let go September 25th, 2022, thank God Wikipedia is here. Brent Key took over the offensive line coach, and he retained the job at Georgia Tech. I was bullish on the hire when they made him. He made Georgia Tech respectable in a way that hadn't existed under that buffoon in the rain that is Jeff Collins. There's no way around this. Brent Key's been an A. Brent Key's been an absolute A, not A plus because Georgia Tech's not made the playoff, but they're a top 25 team. They're a team that's a threat in the ACC. I think Georgia Tech is a team nobody wants to play on their schedule. They play incredibly hard. I think that's that one I think it's exceeded my expectations, but it's been pretty good. Then obviously with the passing of Mike Leach, they promoted Zach Arnett from within defensive coordinator. That didn't work out at all. That was a failure. But like again, I'm gonna give him a different situation. I'm gonna give it a D just because like, he won that bowl game. Then they got Jeff Lebby in there now. 2 years in, Jeff Lebby has Mississippi State got better both years. They made a bowl based on API. Mississippi State's trending up. So I mean, like, but again, that was the only guy you could have hired in that situation. So I'm not going to crush Mississippi State for that. Charlotte, who moved on from what was it? Charlotte's head coach. Charlotte, I don't even know. I think they had like an interim. Biff Poggi was the first guy hired in the cycle, and he was terrible. That was an F. That was kind of like thinking like, oh, I can take the secret sauce from Michigan and make it work, and it didn't at all. In the wake of Scott Frost, you have Matt Rule coming over from the Carolina Panthers to the head coach in Nebraska. This was one that it's been about what I expected. Like the Matt Rule pop here kind of sort of happened, but there's kind of layers to it. The guy likes to, you know, suck all the air out of the room. I'd say right now it's probably been about a B. He's made Nebraska respectable, but they're not terribly great. Again, like Nebraska's a more challenging. The expectations are much higher there than at Baylor and at Temple, for lack of a better word. Kenny Dillingham, leaving Oregon to come take over at Arizona State. Um, I was not a fan of this hire. I thought like this is one of my peers taking over his alma mater. They're going to eat him alive. Arizona was a disaster. Well, Arizona State. Well, my fiance is an Arizona State alum. Kenny Dillingham gave them their best season in 30 years. They they won the Big 12. They gave us Cam Scatabo, Sam Levitt for a year, Jordan Tyson. Made the playoff the second year. First year they were terrible. Last year they were decent. I mean, that's an A minus, A. Given what Arizona State is, you know what? That's an A. You know, A plus. That's probably the best hire on the cycle there. Florida Atlantic, Tom Herman didn't make it. That was enough. That was bad. Stanford, Troy Taylor replacing David Shaw. He got fired due to scandal. He was awful. That's enough. Um, Wisconsin. Oh my God. Just take a sip of water here before I get to that because this is drove me insane. Paul Christ, it wasn't working out. You had Jim Leonard. You decided, he wasn't good enough for you. Now he's about to be the defensive coordinator for the Bills. You bring in Luke Fickle. You thought he was going to be great coming from Cincinnati. He's been train wreck. Like this is an F. Like I don't care that he's still on the job. Like an F for Fickle is just terrible, awful. Also, just I can't wait. I'm just rooting against him to fail. So Wisconsin can get back to actually having a football program. But buddy Mark Knight can actually write about Badgers football with pride. Tulsa, Kevin Wilson coming over from Ohio State's OC. The guy from 17 to 22 is their OC, replacing Philip Montgomery. Didn't work. They had Trey Lamb come in from Eastern Tennessee. That's an F. Texas State, GJ Kinney coming over from Incarnate Word. Probably about a B, B minus. Texas State's going over to the new Pac-12. They've been good, but not great. There have been moments where like, oh, I think they can make the playoff. I think Group of Five haven't quite been there, but like he's been a steadying presence there. Probably better than what Jake Spavital was. Lance Taylor, Western Michigan, fantastic, replacing Tim Lester. Western Michigan might win the Group of Five this year. They won the MAC. They're a buzzsaw. I'll give that an A minus. It's been pretty good thus far. UNLV, Barry Odom replacing Marcus Arroyo. Barry Odom was only in UNLV for 2 years. Now he is entering his second year at Purdue. Um, that's an A. He made UNLV a respectable job. Dan Mullen doesn't take that job if Barry Odom's not that successful. Hugh Freeze coming over from Liberty at Auburn, F. Terrible. Trent Dilfer coming over from Lipscomb Academy at UAB, awful, F. The most interesting one here is Deion Sanders, Colorado from Jackson State. Terrible your first year, terrible last year. Middle year, you're really good 9-3 with Shador, Sanders, and Travis Hunter. You went 9-3. That's C. That's very middle of the pack. Alex Golesh at South Florida coming over from the Tennessee offensive coordinator job. B plus. He did a fantastic job replacing Jeff Scott, who was an atrocious head coach there for the Bulls. I think Golesh could have done a little bit more offensively. I think South Florida was good enough the last 2 years to win the Group of Five, and they didn't do it. And I think he's going to be in for a very rough first year at Auburn. Not, but like he did do a magnificent job in the wake of Jeff Scott. Liberty, Jimmy Chadwell coming over from Coastal Carolina, kind of B minus. Honestly, C for Chadwell. Any thoughts of this guy being a Power Four head coach have completely gone to the wayside? He's not about it. He has no experience. It's become a catch-22. It's kind of become a paradox for him where he doesn't have Power Four. He can't get Power Four head coaching experience because he doesn't have Power Four experience. And the fact that like Liberty has kind of fallen back to earth in the wake of Hugh Freeze leaving, like that's an issue right there. Coastal Carolina, his successor, Tim Beck, no, terrible. That's an F. Cincinnati, Scott Satterfield, that's about a C minus. Former Louisville head coach. The guy replaced you at Louisville's better. You're not as good as the guy you were at Cincinnati. You're just kind of there. Brendan, the only reason you had a decent team last year is Brendan Sorsby. Not good. Kenny Burns, F, won one game. Scandalous at Kent State. Jeff Braun, this is probably, along with Kenny Dillingham, the best hire. I'll give this about an A plus. He's made Louisville respectable and not seedy. He's one of them. He brings a lot of pride to this program. And again, Louisville's not made the playoff yet, but like they're very close. And he's been doing it with a bunch of different quarterbacks. What Jack Plummer 1 year. Well, you did it with Miller Moss this past year. I think the year before you had somebody else. Now you got Lincoln Kineholtz coming in. Like it's very interesting. Brian Newberry at Navy, very tough. I'm gonna give him an A minus. hasn't always been perfect, but like he's brought respectability that we thought that Navy would have under Kenny Matalola. We were shocked when that decision was made. It's worked out okay. Purdue hiring Ryan Walters, he was awful F, and then North Texas hiring Eric Morris, that was an A plus. Actually, no, that's probably right there. So if I had to tie a bow on this to get out of here, the three best hires that were made in the 22 cycle heading into 23, I would say the three best hires I would say are right. I'm just scanning through this. I would say Kenny Dillingham. I would say Brent Key, and I would say Jeff Brom. And then if I had a group of five one that was really good, Eric Morris. The three worst hires that were made here, Ryan Walters. I would say Luke Fickle's been awful. And then I would say the Ryan Walters, Luke Fickle, and Hugh Freeze have been a disaster. And I would say if there's a group of five that was really bad, Trent Dilfer. So it's really weird looking at this cycle. There's a lot. It's either worked or it hasn't. There's been very few where like I'm looking at like I'm on the fence with like who is the most on the fence hire? Like has it been good? Has it been worthwhile? I mean, it's probably the Deion Sanders, Jamie Chadwell kind of group there, Mount Rule, if you will. Just it's interesting looking at it from that angle, wondering how good some of these hires were. And again, I think it shows like in college football, you know very quickly if it's going to work or not. Like anytime there are people out there saying like, "Well, we got to buy more time, we got to wait for it to pop." Well, like these other guys, it's happened or it doesn't. And I mean, like maybe we do live in a microwave society a little bit, and maybe we had to get out of that here. I mean, I don't know. It's unbelievable. But what I do know is that this was episode 247 of False Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter at X at Buhler118. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host, Cody Williams at the Sizzle20. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. Really helps the show grow. Again, coming to you guys, semi-live here. Solek Cup for this episode, the one that's going to be coming out midweek, and then potentially the one coming in around the Super Bowl itself. Again, Cody's covering the Super Bowl. He's more of an NFL guy in some ways. I think he loves college more, but I think every team that he likes gives him pain outside of the Red Sox. Even then, they still give him pain. Pain heals, chicks dig scars, glory lasts forever, and this is false start.